I have to talk again about Victoria in a second, but what a basket case. But first, identity politics is really now strangling us. I mean, strangling freedom of expression, particularly. Latest example, Hollywood now says no film can get its Best Picture Oscar as of 2024. No film can get the Best Picture Oscar unless it casts or hires in front of the camera, behind the camera, a certain number of the oppressed and unrepresented. Or underrepresented. And so these filmmakers, they've got to get a quota of women and gays, transsexuals, blacks, Latinos, Arabs, people with disabilities, even the deaf, which might be a little bit of a problem in the movie business, but we don't worry about that. Joining me is Rita Panahi, Sky News presenter and Herald Sun columnist, and Daniel Wild, Director of Research at the Institute of Public Affairs. Rita, this is leading, really just setting up the ball, sparking the ball for you to kick. Is this a good idea?
Well, they want to be completely divorced from reality and turn off the remaining supporters. I mean, Hollywood has just been so out of touch, and we've seen with the Academy Awards in particular, the ratings for that program plummet as the actors get up and give speeches about politics and who to vote for and all the eels of the world. You know, just entertain us. We don't go to the movies to tick off diversity boxes and quotas and to be lectured to about progressive politics. And I think they really are alienating a sizable portion of the population by being so overtly political. Now, we know Hollywood leans very much left, that if you aren't left, if you dare speak up and you're a conservative, you're pretty much blacklisted. There's a new McCarthyism in play. But instituting these sort of policies where they're forcing films competing for the Academy Awards to have certain quotas and diversity targets, really, that's not art. That's not a being artistic pursuit. That is just wokeness gone mad.
I think that's probably right. I guess we're not going to see another making of the film. Well, I don't know, what shall we say? Henry V, where a quarter of the English army happened by sheer coincidence to be black. I mean, how about that? I don't know. Shakespeare, I think, is probably doomed, apart from Othello. Daniel Wild, I thought this qualification in the guidelines was very funny and, in fact, very telling. It says the racial diversity hirings must be from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group. Now, I guess that's because a lot of people in the film business do happen to be of a racial minority, except it's not quite underrepresented. It's the Jewish racial minority, which strikes me as proving that if you've got talent, you can actually make it in Hollywood. You don't need these quotas.
That's right, Andrew. You don't need the quotas. And quotas and identity politics are deeply, deeply dehumanising, because they deprive people of being rewarded on the basis of their hard work and merit and the kind of contribution they can make, in this case, whether it's to movies or other artistic endeavours or anything else in society. It treats people purely on the basis of their race or their ethnicity or their religion or some other immutable characteristics such as their gender. And it's not just the Academy, Andrew. This is just the latest example, as you rightly pointed out. It's all across the universities, the ABC, major corporations, the major sporting codes. This is something that's being promulgated and pushed onto the mainstream of Western societies, Australia, America, the UK, everywhere. It's something that's deeply divisive. It cuts across every single principle of the values that we hold of treating people as they are and rewarding them on the basis of their own hard work and their merit.
Well, I just wonder if this rule is going to apply to Spike Lee. Will suddenly he may be making lots of films starring white people instead of black? I mean, it's just so crazy. This is crazy. But Rita, look, I'm sorry if you're living interstate, you're just going to have to put up with this, because we've got a tyranny in Victoria. It's got to be defeated. So I'm going to talk about Victoria, the state with the harshest lockdown you'll probably now see in any state or country, and I include communist China, including a lockdown, Rita, that was not ordered, a a curfew at night that was not ordered by the Chief Health Officer, as he admitted yesterday. It seems that it was instead ordered by the police, or maybe, in fact, by the Premier himself. But, Rita, it was a terrible memory fail today. The Premier just couldn't remember quite whose idea this was, but he did say it sure helped the police. Have a listen.
I can't pinpoint the individual on the day when they said, oh, let's do this. If you wanted to go exercising at midnight, you can't. If you want to go shopping at midnight, you can't. If you're a worker and you're permitted, you can. If you need urgent care, you can get that care. Beyond that, what it means is no one's sneaking out going to their mate's place. No one's going and doing things that they are by law not allowed to do. So it hasn't changed the rules. The rules, that is, the reasons you can leave, they're all the same. It just makes the job of police much, much easier.
OK, Rita, was that a great idea for a good reason for taking away people's freedom to impose a curfew?
A curfew that we're going to have for another 7 weeks until end of October, 26th, 27th of October, perhaps even longer if those ridiculous benchmarks aren't met. We always knew this was a medically based provision. We knew that. It's just that Brett Sutton came out and actually admitted to it. It is what makes it newsworthy. But anybody with any sort of sense knew that having a curfew was not a medical restriction. It was put there to make policing easier. And if anything, Andrew, I tell you, when you go to the supermarket, one of the few places you're allowed to go, they are so much more crowded because their trading hours have been slashed by 4.5 hours a day. So you're actually having people in crowded places, the very thing you're trying to avoid. And if someone wants to go exercising at midnight, how is that in any way a risk factor? I mean, it is an insane policy that has been uncritically accepted by so many in the media and so many of the Dan cult, and there is absolutely no evidence-based medical basis for it.
Daniel?
Well, that's right, Andrew. Rita's hit the nail on the head. There's no medical basis for a lot of these interventions, and there's no medical basis for Daniel Andrews' elimination strategy that he outlined in the roadmap. Now, he denies that it's an elimination strategy, but it's 28 days of no new cases or no active cases before you can go back to normalcy. And the problem is, Andrew, that an elimination strategy is something that has failed everywhere around the world, anywhere it's been tried at any time. It's not going to work in Victoria. It's not going to work in Australia. But what is deeply concerning to me, and in addition to how evasive Daniel Andrews has been at his press conferences, as he very rarely talks about the humanitarian disaster that's being unleashed by his lockdown measures. We know that some 260,000 Victorians are going to lose their jobs under the roadmap of Daniel Andrews, in addition to the 430,000 Victorians that have already lost their jobs since March. And this is not just an economic problem. We know that people who don't have a job have serious physiological, psychological, mental health problems. They're much more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. They're much more likely to commit crime. These lockdown measures could be unleashing a humanitarian disaster that could go on for decades.
Thank you very much for your time, Daniel Wild and Rita Panahi. You're absolutely correct. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Andrew.